Thank you very much. David, thank you for those kind words of introduction. Thank each and every one of you for being here tonight. Thank you for inviting me to come by. A poor child from rural Alabama. It is good to be here. It is good to be off of Capitol Hill tonight and to be here. I want to thank each and every one of you for all of your good and great work. I know tonight that probably some federal employees here, so thank you. What happened a few days ago was so sad, shameful, should never, ever happen again. And I want to apologize. Thank you for your hard work. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for your dedication. Thank you for your love of country. Now, I didn't grow up in a big city like McLean. I didn't grow up in a big city like Richmond or Norfolk or Washington, D.C. or Baltimore. I grew up on a farm in rural Alabama, about 50 miles from Montgomery, outside of a place called Troy. My father was a sharecropper, a tenant farmer. But back in 1944, when I was 4 years old, and I do remember when I was 4. How many of you remember when you was 4? What happened to the rest of us? Well, my father had saved $300, and with the $300, he bought 110 acres of land. My family still own that land today. On this farm, we raised a lot of cotton and corn, peanuts, hogs, cows, and chicken. David would tell you, if you come to Capitol Hill and visit my congressional office, the moment you walk through the door, the first thing the staff will offer you will be some peanuts. Because in the state of Georgia, like in the state of Alabama, we raise a lot of peanuts. And the Georgia Peanut Commission provide all members of the Georgia congressional delegation with peanuts to give to our visitors. The next thing they might offer you will be a Coca-Cola, because Atlanta is the home of the Coca-Cola Company, and Coca-Cola provide all members of the Georgia delegation with an adequate supply of Coca-Cola products. Every now and then I may have a Diet Coke, but I don't eat any of those peanuts. So don't tell the people in Georgia I don't eat any of those peanuts. I ate so many peanuts when I was growing up in rural Alabama, I just don't want to see any more peanuts. Now, also on this farm, it was my responsibility to care for the chickens. We raised a lot of chickens, hogs, cows. We really did. Any of you know anything about raising chickens? One hand there, two there. Okay, well, let's compare notes. As a little boy, I fell in love with raising chickens like no one else could raise chickens. I became very good at raising chickens. And to take the fresh eggs, mark them with a pencil, place them under the setting hen, and wait for 3 long weeks for the little chicks to hatch. Some of you may be saying, now, John Lewis, why do you mark those fresh eggs with a pencil before you place them under the setting hen? Well, from time to time, another hen would get on that same nest. And there would be some more eggs, more eggs, more eggs. You had to be able to tell the fresh eggs from the eggs that were already under the setting hen. You follow me? You don't follow me, it's okay. So when these little chicks were hatched, I would fool these setting hens. I would cheat on these setting hens. I would take these little chicks and put them in a box with a lantern, raise them on their own, or give them to another hen, get some more fresh eggs, mark them with a pencil, place them under the setting hen, and encourage the setting hen to stay in the nest for another 3 weeks. I kept on fooling and cheating on these setting hens. And when I look back on it, it was not the right thing to do. It was not the moral thing to do. It was not the most loving thing to do. It was not the most nonviolent thing to do. It was not the most democratic thing to do. I was never quite able to save $18.98 to order the most inexpensive hatcher or incubator from the Cicero bookstore. Any of you old enough to remember the Cicero book catalog? The big book? Heavy book? Thick book? Some people call it, well, I wish I had this. I wish I had that. Some people call it the wish book. So I just kept on wishing, trying to save $18.98 so I wouldn't have to cheat on these post-setting hens. But as a young child, about 8 and a half or 9 years old, I wanted to be a minister. I wanted to preach the gospel. So from time to time, with the help of my brothers and sisters and my cousins, we would gather all of our chickens together in the chicken yard. And my brothers and sisters and cousins would line the outside of the chicken yard. And I would start speaking or preaching. But the chickens, along with my brothers and sisters, they became faithful listeners and members of my congregation. And I would start speaking and preaching. And I would notice, and when I look back on it, some of these chickens would bow their heads. Some of these chickens would shake their heads. They never quite said amen. But I'm convinced that some of those chickens that I preached to in the 40s and the 50s tended to listen to me much better than some of my colleagues listened to me today in the Congress. As a matter of fact, some of those chickens was just a little more productive. At least, don't tell my colleagues I said it, but at least they produce eggs. Well, that's another story. We visited the little town of Troy, only 10 miles from my home. Visit Montgomery, about 50 miles away. Visit Tuskegee, about 45 miles away. Or visit Birmingham or Selma. I saw those signs that said white men, colored men, white women, colored women. I would ask my mother, my father, my grandparents, my great-grandparents why. They go downtown to the theater on a Saturday afternoon. All of us little black children had to go upstairs to the balcony. All the little white children were downstairs to the first floor. And I kept saying, why? And they would say, that's the way it is. Don't get in the way, don't get in trouble. But in 1955, at the age of 15, in the 10th grade, I heard about Rosa Parks. I heard the words of Martin Luther King Jr. on an old radio. The action of Rosa Parks, the words and leadership of Martin Luther King Jr. inspired me to find a way to get in the way, to get in trouble, what I call good trouble, necessary trouble. And sometime I've been led to believe that as people of faith, we must be inspired to get in good trouble, necessary trouble. I was so inspired by the action of Rosa Parks, the leadership and words of Martin Luther King Jr., that in 1956, at the age of 16, with some of my brothers and sisters and cousins, we went down to the public library in the little town of Troy, Alabama, trying to get library cards, trying to check out some books. And we were told by the librarian that the library was not for colors, for whites only. I never went back to the Pike County Public Library, not the same building, until July 5th, 1998, for a book signing of my book, Walking with the Wind. And hundreds of blacks and white citizens showed up. At the end of the program, they gave me a library card. It says something about the distance we've come and the progress we've made in America in laying down the burden of race. Some of you may ask me tonight, how do you get involved in the civil rights movement? How did you meet Martin Luther King Jr.? When I finished high school in May of 1957, I applied to attend a little college called Troy State College then, now known as Troy University. Submitted my application, my high school transcript. I never heard a word from the college, not one word. So I wrote a letter to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I didn't tell my mother, my father, my grandparents, any of my sisters or brothers, any of my teachers. I just wrote a letter to Dr. King, told him I needed his help. Martin Luther King Jr. wrote me back and sent me a round-trip Greyhound bus ticket invited me to come to Montgomery to meet with him. In the meantime, Pastor, I had been accepted at a little school called American Baptist Theological Seminary, Nanda College of the Bible. So in September 1957, 17 years old, an uncle of mine gave me a $100 bill, more money than I ever had, and gave me one of these large Foot Lockers, one of these upright trunks. You know what I'm talking about? That you can swing over and bring it together. They had the drapers where you can hang your clothes in the drawers. I put everything that I own in that trunk, except those chickens, and went off to school to Nashville. And after being there for a few days, I told one of my teachers that I had been in contact with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. This teacher knew Dr. King. They both had attended Morehouse College together in Atlanta. He informed Martin Luther King Jr. that I was there, and Dr. King suggested when I was home from spring break to come and see him. On a Saturday morning, in March of 1958, by this time I'm 18 years old, my father drove me to the Greyhound bus station. I boarded the bus, traveled to Montgomery, and a young lawyer by the name of Fred Gray, who was also a minister, met me at the Greyhound bus station and drove me to the First Baptist Church, pastored by the Reverend Ralph Abernathy, a colleague of Martin Luther King Jr., and ushered me into the pastor's study. And I saw Martin Luther King Jr. and Ralph Abernathy standing behind a desk. I was so scared. I didn't know what to say or what to do. And Dr. King spoke up and said, "Are you the boy from Troy? Are you John Lewis?" And I said, "Dr. King, I am John Robert Lewis." I gave my whole name. I wanted him to know that I was the right person. That was the beginning of my involvement with Martin Luther King Jr. and my involvement in the Civil Rights Movement. And I never looked back. It was in Nashville as a student with students from Fisk University, Tennessee State University, Vanderbilt University, Peabody College, American Baptist, Scarrett College, that we all started studying the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence. We studied what Gandhi attempted to do in South Africa, what he accomplished in India. We studied Thoreau and civil disobedience. We studied the great religions of the world. We studied the teaching of the great teacher, the teaching of Jesus. And we started what we call test sit-ins. We had what we call social drama, a role playing, black and white college students and some young high school students. Test sit-ins at the two large department stores, and later at the variety stores in downtown Nashville. Be sitting there in an orderly, peaceful, nonviolent fashion, waiting to be served, well-dressed college students and high school students. And someone would come up and maybe spit on us, or put lighted cigarettes out in our hair, or down our backs, pull us off the lunch counter stool. And we would be sitting there reading a book, working on a paper, or just looking straight ahead. During those days, in order to work my way and pay my expenses through school, I worked as a janitor for 2 years in the administration building. And we needed some paper, a ring of paper. I didn't steal this paper, but I liberated a ring of paper. And 500 sheets, and we put the little do's and don'ts. So, do sit up straight. Don't laugh out. Don't talk back. Obey your leaders. In the end, it said, remember the teaching of Jesus, Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr. May God bless you. And on February 27, 1960, 89 of us were arrested. And every single student had a copy of the do's and don'ts. And the local paper in Nashville, the Nashville Tennessean, printed those do's and don'ts. So the whole city saw these well-dressed young black and white students, saw their message, saw them been arrested and taken to jail. And Nashville became the first major city in the heart of the South to desegregate lunch counters and restaurants. We wanted to make Nashville an open city, but to create what we call the beloved community. Many of us grew to accept nonviolence, not simply as a technique, not simply as a tactic, but as a way of life, as a way of living. We accepted this idea that you could not hate someone, for hate was too heavy a burden to bear. That you had to have the power, the ability, and the capacity to forgive. And that we should see our opposition, our opponent, as an innocent little child, a little baby. Because we're not born putting someone down because of their race, their color, their faith, their religion, or their nationality. Our environment teaches us to put someone down, look someone in a different light. But we never gave up. The day I was arrested, I didn't give up. I didn't give in. I didn't become bitter or hostile. I felt like I had crossed over. There was no turning back. I first came to Washington, D.C. in May of 1961, the same year that President Barack Obama was born, with a group to test a decision of the United States Supreme Court banning discrimination in interstate travel. Back in 1961, an interracial group sponsored by the Congress of Racial Equality, CORE, organized a series of nonviolent workshops, training. We left Washington, D.C. on May 4th of 1961, this interracial group. Just think, back in 1961, black people and white people couldn't leave Washington, D.C., traveling through Virginia, through North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, into New Orleans, being seated together on a bus, a trailway bus, a Greyhound bus, or together on a train. Could use the same restroom facility, waiting room. We had to change that. It was a very dangerous mission. I remember so well. I had a seatmate from Washington to a little town in South Carolina, to Rock Hill, about 35 miles from Charlotte. But even before we got to Charlotte, before we got to Rock Hill, there was a young man who tried to get a shoe shine at a so-called white waiting room, but had a so-called white barbershop. He was arrested in jail. The next day he went to trial, and the jury dismissed the charges against him. But outside of Charlotte and Rock Hill, my seatmate, young man, the two of us tried to enter a so-called white waiting room, and we were attacked and beaten and left lying in a pool of blood. The local police officials came up and wanted to know whether we wanted to press charges. We said no. We come with love, peace, and nonviolence. Many years later, one of the men that attacked us beat us and left us lying in a pool of blood. As a matter of fact, in February '09, less than a month after the inauguration of President Obama, this man came with his son. His son had been encouraging his father to seek out the people that he had attacked in Rock Hill, at the bus station, and at restaurants and lunch counter. He came to my office on Capitol Hill in the Cannon House office building. And he said, "Mr. Lewis, I'm one of the people who attacked you and your seatmate. I want to apologize. Will you forgive me?" His young son started crying. He started crying. I started crying. I said, "Yes, I accept your apology. Yes, I forgive you." The two of them hugged me. I hugged them back. And they called me brother. And I called them brothers. I saw this gentleman another 3 times. That is the power of peace, the power of love, the power of nonviolence, to be reconciled. And so when people say nothing has changed in America, I feel like saying, come and walk in my shoes. The signs that I saw when I was growing up, those signs are gone. And they will not return. And the only places our children and their children will see those signs will be in a book, in a museum, or on a video. Our country is a different country. Our country is a better country. And maybe somehow, in some way, with love, peace, nonviolence, a sense of community, America could emerge as a model for the rest of the world. We have the power. We have the capacity. We have the ability to redeem the soul of America. Here in the American South, we can point the way to a better way, a different way, to the beloved community. Just think, a few short years ago, in the heart of the South, people couldn't register to vote simply because of the color of their skin. In my native state of Alabama, in parts of Georgia, in Mississippi, my own mother, my own father, my own grandparents didn't become registered voters until after the Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965. Some of you are old enough to remember. In 1965, a state like the state of Mississippi had a black voting age population of more than 450,000. And only about 16,000 blacks were registered to vote. One county in the heart of the Black Belt of Alabama, the county was more than 80% African American, but there was not a single registered African American voter. You had to pass a so-called literacy test. Black lawyers, black doctors, high school principals, teachers, college professors were told they could not read or write well enough. On one occasion, a man was asked to count the number of bubbles in a bar of soap. On another occasion, a man was asked to count the number of jelly beans in a jar. I came to Washington again in 1963 at the age of 23, when I have had all of my hair and a few pounds lighter, with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and others, to meet with President Kennedy. There were 6 of us, the so-called Big Six. A. Philip Randolph, labor leader, civil rights leader. Whitney Young of the National Urban League. James Farmer of CORE, Roy Wilkins of the NAACP, and Dr. King. And it was in that meeting in the White House that we told the president we were going to march on Washington. President Kennedy didn't like the idea of hundreds and thousands of people coming to Washington. He said, in effect, if you bring all of these people to Washington, won't there be violence and chaos and disorder? We will never get a civil rights bill through the Congress. Mr. Randolph spoke up and said, Mr. President, in his baritone voice, Mr. President, there's been orderly, peaceful, nonviolent protests. We left that meeting with President Kennedy, came out on the lawn of the White House, and said we had a meaningful, productive meeting with the President of the United States, and we told him we were going to march on Washington. A few days later, the 6 of us met, as a matter of fact, on July 5th, 1963, at the old Roosevelt Hotel in New York City. And in that meeting, we invited 4 major white labor and religious leaders to join us in issuing the call for the March on Washington, including Eugene Carson Blake, the great Presbyterian, Rabbi Jehoram Prince of the American Jewish Congress, Walter Reuther, labor leader, Matthew Armand of the National Catholic Council for Racial and Social Justice. So the 10 of us issued the call for the March on Washington. And we came here, went up on Capitol Hill, meeting with congressional leadership, House members, senators, both Democrats and Republicans. And later we left Capitol Hill, coming down by Union Station near Constitution Avenue. And there was this storm of just hundreds and thousands of people marching, walking. It was almost like saying, they were already marching. We were supposed to be the leaders. But it was saying, there go my people, let me catch up with them. But I tell you, during the past 50 years, we have witnessed what I like to call a nonviolent revolution. A revolution of values, a revolution of ideas. Our country is a better country, and we are a better people. There are changes to be made. We must not get lost in the sea of despair. We must keep the faith and keep our eyes on the prize. I'm going to tell one last little story. I did get arrested a few times. I got arrested a few days ago, a little more than a week ago, with 7 other members of Congress, 200 people or more, trying to say we need to do something about comprehensive immigration reform. But I never would give up. I would never give out. I would keep the faith. It's my hope that you would keep the faith and teach our children, our young people, to keep the faith. We're one people, we're one family, we're one house. We all live in the house of faith. We all live in the American house. We all live in the world house. I want to end by telling just one little story, and then we will have some questions. When I was growing up outside of Troy, Alabama, 50 miles from Montgomery, I had an aunt by the name of Seneva. And my Aunt Seneva lived in what we call a shotgun house. I know here in this part of Virginia, you've never seen a shotgun house. You don't even know what I'm talking about. Don't fool me, you don't know what I'm talking about. My Aunt Seneva didn't have a green manicured lawn. Had a simple plain dirt yard. And sometimes she would walk out into the woods and cut branches from a dogwood tree and tie these branches together, and she would make a broom. And she called that broom the breast broom. And she would take this broom, take these branches and just tie them together and make this brush broom, and she would take this brush broom and sweep this dirt yard very clean, sometimes 2 and 3 times a week, but especially on a Friday or Saturday because she wanted it to look good during the weekend. For those of you who may not know what a shotgun house is, it's an old house, one way in, one way out, maybe a tin roof. It's, in a nonviolent sense, it's an old house where you can bounce a basketball through the front door and it will go straight out the back door. My Aunt Seneva lived in a shotgun house. But one Saturday afternoon, a group of my brothers and sisters and cousins, about 12 or 15 of us, young children, were out playing in my Aunt Seneva dirt yard, and an unbelievable storm came up. The wind started blowing, the thunder started rolling, the lightning started flashing, and the rain started beating on the tin roof of this old shotgun house. My aunt became terrified. She started crying. She thought this whole house was going to blow away. So she got all of us little children together, and told us to hold hands. The wind continued to blow, the thunder continued to roll, the lightning continued to flash. The rain just continued to beat on the tin roof of this old shotgun house. And she cried and she kept crying. And all of us little children just cried and we cried. And when one corner of this old house appeared to be lifting from its foundation, my aunt had us to walk to that side to try to hold the house down with our little bodies. When the other side appeared to be lifting, she had us to walk to that corner to try to hold the house down. We were little children walking with the wind, but we never left the house. The civil rights movement in America was saying, in effect, yes, we all live in the same house, that the wind may blow, the thunder may roll, the lightning may flash, and the rain may beat on our old house. But we must never leave the house. Call it the house of Virginia. Call it the house of Washington, D.C. Call it the house of Georgia, or Alabama, or California, New York. Call it American house. Call it the world house. We all live in the same house. Look at America. Maybe our foremothers and our forefathers all came to this great land in different ships, but we're all in the same boat now. We have to look out for each other, care for each other. We're one people, we're one family, we are one house. So with faith, peace, and love, may God bless you. You want me to stand?
Stay right here.
Okay.
Congressman Lewis has graciously offered to take a few questions. So I'll do the monitoring and prompting and all that sort of good stuff. Any questions? Any questions? Please.
Beth Braxton, and I work in a church, New York Avenue Presbyterian Church in the city. And
I've been there a few years ago.
yeah, with the Washington Interfaith Network, and we were just discussing recently about the issue because we're working with a couple of African American churches together in the city and talking about the issue of poverty and race and so forth. And somebody said, we got to get our focus. And I said, well, I think our focus is poverty here in the city. And they said, oh, no, it's race, race, race. And I was a bit taken back because I affirm what you said. I think we've come a long way, about the same age you are, and gone through the civil rights.
You're much younger.
Having grown up in Atlanta, grew up in Atlanta, Georgia.
Good.
Went through a lot of different things. But I guess I think we need to think beyond race in the sense today of being a part of the human race and working together on issues of poverty and inequities and hatred and greed and that seem more important to me. But in the city, that's what people are saying. So I'd like to know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I think as a people, and thank you for your willingness to be out there, to finding a way to get in the way. And sometimes as a people of faith, we're afraid to get in the way. We're afraid to make some noise. So whether it's about poverty or about the issue of race, I think sometimes the two go together in many of our large urban centers. Sometimes people think when you discuss poverty, they think it's only people of color. You look at some of our large urban communities. But when you leave the large cities, the large urban centers, poverty transcends race. So when people are hurting, I think with the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., in 1960. Through there in 1965, through Lyons County, there was not a single registered African American voter. I was in the Supreme Court, in the chamber, when members of the court heard the argument on Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. And when that decision came down, I wanted to cry. I thought it was a major setback. I thought the decision was a dagger in the heart of the Voting Rights Act. I took it personal. I gave a little blood on that bridge, almost died on that bridge on that Sunday afternoon for the right of all people to participate in the political process. But I have to believe that we're going to fix it, that both Democrats and Republican members of the House, one of the leaders spoke to me just last Friday and said, we got to do it, John, and we're going to do it. So I said to myself, these guys that voted the way they did, they were never denied the right to participate. They don't know what it is to stand in unmovable lines, or to have someone to say you must be literate to register to vote. When I spoke at the March on Washington on August 28, 1963, I said, one man, one vote. But just think, a few short years ago, not that long ago, in our own country, in America, women couldn't register to vote. We denied women, should they own lands in certain political subdivision, you couldn't register to vote. So we got to open up our democracy and let people come in. Jimmy Carter said on one occasion, being able to register to vote or to cast a vote should be as easy as getting a glass of water.
Jack, please. Thank you very much for your witness to what you've done. You changed my life, you and Dr. Martin Luther King, and you brought that issue into every life, what you did. And I'm wondering now how that same spirit can bring another civil right, the issue of poverty, into every home. I mean, it was you, it was the dogs, it was Bull Connor, it was all of it. How can we get that to quicken, to galvanize all of us on another issue that I consider a civil right issue?
Well, I think it's important for all of us, for people of faith, but the media, social media, and to put the spotlight on the issue of poverty and hunger. We got to be there. We got to have people willing to go out and do what people like Bobby Kennedy and McGovern and others did. We got to go there. I remember Dr. King having a meeting with President Johnson after he received the Nobel Peace Prize. They came back, so after the Civil Rights Act had been signed into law, he said, we need a Voting Rights Act. And President Johnson said, in effect, we don't have the votes in the Congress to get a Voting Rights Act. If you want it, make me do it. Make me do it, and I will sign it. So we intensified our effort in Selma. The same way Birmingham with Bull Connor and the dogs and the fire hoses help create the climate, the environment for the Civil Rights Act. Sometimes you have to dramatize the issue, make it real. Photographers like this young man here have to paint the picture. We have to write these articles, let people see it, make it real. People used to ask me in Nashville when I was a student, what are we going to do, John? Are we going to sit in? Are we going to stand in? So we just found a way to dramatize it, put a face on it, make it real.
Please, one more question, if you please, maybe two.
Can I get one?
Yeah.
Okay.
You've been moved by the Spirit, you control it.
I think Reagan said that one time. Congressman, when you arrived up here as a freshman congressman, you entered a chamber, many of whose members, maybe a majority from your own party, had spent their political careers fighting against everything you stood for. I wonder if you could say a few words about how you approached that situation when you came up here as a brand new congressman.
When I came here, you know, I've been in Congress for a while, but we have on Capitol Hill on a Thursday morning, when I first came, many Democrats and Republicans together. We became like a family, like a circle of trust, a band of brothers and sisters. We had an 8 o'clock prayer breakfast. And one morning, I was asked to say a few words, talk about my life. And I told the story of the Freedom Ride, being jailed in Birmingham and dropped off at the Tennessee state line by Bull Connor after being in protective custody and being beaten and left unconscious at the Greyhound station in Montgomery by an angry mob. And then I talked about going to Jackson, to the city jail, and later the county jail, and later to the state penitentiary at Parchment. And in the audience was the late Sonny Montgomery, who was a wonderful man. He had been later the chair of the Veteran Committee. He was the general of the Mississippi National Guard. And he came up and he said, "John, I am the one that met you all at the Mississippi and Alabama state line that takes you to Jackson to be arrested and later to Parchment." And we became wonderful friends. He always treated me like a gentleman. I treated him like a gentleman with great respect. People that you get to know, you work with, you're on a committee with, have breakfast, you work out together in the gym, you go to dinner with. But a lot of that has changed during the past few years. It's a different world. I don't know what else I can say about that.
One last question, please, Ray.
This congregation, Lewinsville Presbyterian Church, has recently adopted a vision statement that states that we are called by God to promote civil discourse on public policy issues to work toward social justice. So that is our congregation's vision statement. We're in the process of trying to figure out what that might mean in practical terms. What would be your recommendations to us as a body of Christ in Lewinsville Presbyterian Church as to how we could promote civil discourse on public policy issues to work toward social justice?
Well, who am I to come here to this church, to this community, and say you should do this or that, or the 1, 2, 3s of ABC? But I said, follow the teaching of the great teacher. When you see something that is not right, speak up. Speak out. Be not afraid. Be courageous. Find a way to get in the way. Be a light. Other theologians and writers and scholars have said that the church must be a headlight and not a tail light. The church got to get out there and push and pull to redeem the soul of America. I know this is a Presbyterian church, but I tell you, I'm Baptist, have a lot of Presbyterian friends, brothers and sisters. I love the new Pope. And I'm not Catholic. We have, I think we're called by the great teacher. We called by God Almighty to bring light to dark places, to heal and bound the broken. That's our calling. That's our mission. And talk to our brothers and sisters to create that beloved community, a community that respects the dignity and the worth of every human being. Now, people ask me, I'm getting in trouble here. Now, people ask me from time to time, why do you take such a strong stand for comprehensive immigration reform? I said, it's the right thing to do. We have hundreds and thousands and millions of people living here, and many of these individuals, especially children, live in fear. A few days ago, I was in my office, just walked in the door, and a young lady came down. She was from another office, interning in some member's office, and she came with a little basket of cookies. And she said, Congressman, I want to thank you for what you did yesterday. She meant the arrest. She said, I'm a dreamer. Then I get to Atlanta on Friday in the office building where I work. A young lady came up and said to me, she said, thank you. She said, for 20 years, I've lived here and I was not legal, but I'm legal now. And she started crying. So what can you do? It's part of the role of the church. What would Jesus do? What would the great teacher do? What would the great teacher say? And many of the religious groups all over America, in the heart of Alabama, heart of Georgia, Mississippi, they're reaching out to do something about comprehensive immigration reform. There's a role for the church to play. You have to push and pull the politicians along and get them to see the light.
We are so grateful for you being here.
Thank you.
It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you.
Honor for